The Philippines, 17 regions and 81 provinces, spread across 7,641 islands, each one a home to people, places, and potential.
The Philippines, a member of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and BIMPIAGA, the Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East ASEAN Growth Area.
There's definitely more to the Philippines than just the national capital region.
Find out more about what the rest of the regions that comprise our archipelago and the regional groupings that our country is part of have to offer to us and to the world on Regional Roundup.
Regional Roundup with Bing Kimpo. A closer look at the regions in and around us.
A wider perspective of our islands and our part of the world. Welcome back to Regional Roundup. My name is Bing Kimpo. Last July, the Philippine Space Agency, the Department of Science and Technology, and the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas began their test deployment of satellite internet service in two rural banks in Batangas, the Progressive Bank of Malvar and the Rural Bank of Cuenca. Now, according to the Department of Information and Communications Technology, these banks are, and I quote, situated in geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas, or GIDAs, where the installation of additional terrestrial networks to boost connectivity may not be feasible. Now, this development caught my interest for a couple of reasons. One, I was truly happy to find out that there actually are banks in areas that the DICT considers geographically isolated and disadvantaged. That they are there to provide needed financial services is indeed a huge help to the local economy. And two, having spent a few weeks recently in a place where sufficient internet connectivity remains a challenge, really got me thinking about how satellite-based access may be a game changer for work in some parts of our archipelago. So this episode, we are talking more about this test deployment of satellite-based internet connectivity in underserved areas. We'll discuss the findings of the Philippine Space Agency, and let's see if this option of going online may be worth looking into if you are in a similarly underserved or unserved area. Our guests are from the Philippine Space Agency, and they are Ms. Maria Victoria Gazmin Basto. Ms. Vic Gazmin Basto is the officer in charge and chief of the Philippine Space Agency's Space Business Development Division. She leads the division in the technology transfer and commercialization activities of the agency. The Space Business Development Division is also one of the divisions responsible for space industry capacity building efforts. And we will also be speaking with Dr. Adrian Salces. Dr. Salces is the Supervising Science Research Specialist of the Spacecraft Payload and Communication System Development Division. Dr. Salces recently obtained his PhD in Engineering from the Kyushu Institute of Technology, with a specialization in space engineering. So Vic, give us some context to the Philippine Space Agency's collaboration with the Bangko Sentral.
PSP is tapping the Philippine Space Agency to assist them identify what are the available space technologies that they can adopt so that they can provide connectivity or financial inclusivity in areas in the Philippines. According to BSP, they have noted that there are 1,634 municipalities in the country, of which 33% or 533 municipalities are still unbanked and do not have access to financial inclusion services. And that's the reason why they're trying to adopt satellite internet technology in these areas because, as you know, it's really difficult. It's expensive to install a tower, a network in these areas. Since satellite internet is easily deployable in remote areas or far-flung areas, that is the reason why we're working with BSP to assist them, sir.
And Dr. Salces, please tell us a bit about the satellite-based internet connectivity solutions that you are deploying for banks in the GIDA areas.
The satellite-based internet connectivity solution that we recently deployed for banks in Batangas uses what is called a geostationary satellite, or geosatellite for short. So it's different from the satellites that are used by Starlink, which uses what is called a low Earth orbit satellites. So these LEO satellites are much closer to the Earth compared to a geostationary satellite, which are located at an altitude of about 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. With this altitude or distance, the satellite appears stationary in the sky from the point of view of any observer on Earth. So this is because the satellite revolves around the Earth at the same rate as the Earth rotates on its axis. So you see a synchronization between the movement of the satellite and the rotation of the Earth. So what's the purpose of the satellite then? So the satellite acts as a relay which establishes communication between a remote user site where your customer is located and a gateway facility. So this gateway facility is a facility of the satellite ISP that connects the ground station of the satellite communication system to the terrestrial internet infrastructure. Now, what do we install at the remote user site or at the customer site? So we install a satellite dish. So this satellite dish is an antenna that captures and transmits signal to and from the satellite. The dish is installed outside the bank, and then it is connected to a satellite modem or router set up inside the bank. And it is where the computers of the customers can directly connect to get internet connection. As I mentioned, because the satellite appears to be stationary on the sky, the satellite dish is pointing to a fixed direction in the sky. So this would be very much different from the case of a Starlink, wherein you have a dish that constantly moves to track the moving satellites. And we call this technology a very small aperture terminal, or VSAT. Just to describe a little bit on the performance of this satellite internet solution, this can provide up to 50 megabits per second download and up to 15 megabits per second of upload speed. This is for this particular plan. Now, in terms of latency or delay, in layman's term, it's a fraction of a second. So it's 3 over 5 or 600 milliseconds round trip time. So by round trip time, what we mean there is it is the delay that we experience from the time we request a certain application to the time that we receive the response from a server out there.
Itong visa technology, no, for those who are uninitiated or hindi masyadong familiar, ito ba mas bago o mas luma sa technology ng mga nababanggit na mga Starlink at iba pang mga low Earth orbit satellites?
Visa relatively older compared to the low Earth orbit or LEO satellite technologies.
Yung banks, siyempre, they rely on connectivity for a number of functions. So, having said that, what can banks that are using the VSAT services, what can they do and not do compared to banks in urban areas reliant on fiber optic lines?
Let me start by saying that the primary purpose of this deployment using satellite-based internet connectivity solution in partnership with BSP is to demonstrate the use of satellite internet for banks and GIDAs to access what BSP calls a financial institution portal, or FI portal. So this is BSP's online report submission facility for regulatory and statistical reports. So it offers banks a convenient alternative to submit their data reports to the BSP through the internet. So with this VSAT, the bank staff were able to successfully access the FI portal using the satellite internet provided. Now, in addition to this FI portal, we also demonstrated use of various internet applications such as browsing, email, social media like Facebook, file uploading and downloading using Google Drive. We also tried it to watch YouTube videos perform audio conferencing using Viber app and video conferencing using the Zoom application. Now based on our experience, these applications can well be supported by the satellite internet service. But I have to note that the latency during the audio and video conferencing was quite noticeable. It was about 1.5 seconds of delay. We deployed the satellite internet service in Cuenca and in Malabar in Batangas. So these are considered as geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas or GIDAs. So we started the deployment on July 28th with the installation of the equipment. And then when the setup was found to be working, then we left it there for a month to be able to collect the data. That means in terms of performance and weather data that we would later use to assess the performance in different weather conditions. Okay. So to be able to do that, we spent the first 1 or 2 days together with the DOST Advanced Science and Technology Institute to install what we call a Weather and Performance Monitoring System, or WPMS, along with the VSAT equipment of the satellite ISP. That's how we did it. And so we were able to collect data for about a month. So we consider the deployment as successful.
What's the difference between having a satellite-based internet connection and a fiber-based internet connection?
That's a good question, but I'm sure BSP has a better answer for this. But for us, in terms of connectivity, I guess it would be the consistency of the submission of reports, because we were able to test it, the frequency and in the latency, the data that we were able to gather using this kind of technology. Mas mabilis makakapag-submit ng reports ang banks using the financial inclusion portal. And at the same time, it would be a means for the banks later on in BSP to find a way how to still use this technology to expand it to other services or applications.
So ang na-establish natin sa deployment ng pilot na yan, o the test, is really more for their reports to the BSP. We still haven't seen whether they work in real-world deployments of, let's say, checking your balance or your ATM or withdrawing cash. Wala pa yun dun.
We tried, sir, pero again, it's a small controlled. It's in a controlled environment.
Okay.
That's why we're doing this pilot test, just to gather data for decision making later of BSP and other rural banks.
Well, the reason I asked that, because obviously as far as the people are concerned, yun ang pinakabahalaga sa kanila. Will they be able to access their accounts from an ATM, or will they be able to fish out money from an ATM diba, later on? What are your plans for rolling this out across other banks in the geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas?
As I mentioned earlier, sir, we're still assisting BSP to do further pilot tests in other regions. Kasi by phase kasi po, until such time that they will be able to develop a concrete plan how to roll out this satellite internet technology nationwide. I mentioned there are about 533 municipalities pa na bank area, so we wanted to, of course, in the future, target and connect all, municipalities.
Okay. What other government agencies and institutions will benefit from satellite-based internet connectivity?
Name a few, sir. Well, the ICT, as we understand, has already adopted satellite internet technology for their free Wi-Fi for all rollout. Other agencies may also take advantage of this, like DepEd for their schools, yung mga last mile schools nila, sir. DOH as well can also take advantage of this for their telehealth or telemedicine. programs, especially for GIDA areas.
From a cost perspective, does satellite-based internet connectivity make sense, or is it still too expensive at this point?
Well, in areas where there is available terrestrial solutions or terrestrial internet providers, then it would be cheaper for a consumer to avail of terrestrial internet solutions, sir. However, since we know that the Philippines is an archipelagic country, there are a lot of islands. This is where satellite technology would make sense. It's an effective technology, rapidly deployable solution for broadband internet connectivity, especially in hard to reach areas. And if and these satellite technology may only be the solution available for them. People in remote areas without connectivity would be missing out on opportunities that may help them improve their livelihood or businesses. I mean, MSMEs can use the internet to sell their products online, on social media as well. They can already access online services such as government services, then and their banking needs. They may be able to transact or get or receive payments or send payments online already. So itong mga solutions na to for our consumers, we think that for remote areas, this technology would really make sense for them.
Now, for people or companies in geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas, or even just underserved areas, if they're considering satellite based internet connectivity, and I'm sure the awareness of it right now is really ramped up, what are things that they should ask, consider, or look for in a satellite internet service provider?
So number one would be you have to understand your own requirements. You have to ask yourself how many people are going to be using the internet in the household. What will they use it for? Yung user behavior natin. Halimbawa, yung mga anak mo ba, gagamit ba ng YouTube yan, online school? You have to consider those because it would boil down to the type of plan that you will be choosing later for your family or for your household or even for your business. And then next would be second, the type of plan. Based on bandwidth allocation or assignment, there are two basic types of internet subscription. One would be shared bandwidth, and the other one is a dedicated bandwidth. Magkaiba po to, so we need to understand what those mean. So in a shared bandwidth plan, no user is allocated a fixed bandwidth. This is because the available bandwidth is shared among multiple users. Speed and reliability of connection are not guaranteed. And during peak hours, the users will experience a significant drop in speed. So we can relate this into cars in EDSA. So if you have experience driving in EDSA, ang daming sasakyan. And during peak hours, dahil ang daming sasakyan, it's so slow to move forward. So that's what we call the shared bandwidth. All right. The other one is the dedicated bandwidth subscription. It allocates a fixed bandwidth to each user throughout the contract duration. This means that the user is assured of a reliable connection and can normally enjoy a steady speed close to the promised value. So if you see a dedicated, pag pumipila ka sa banko or sa any services, mall, there is a dedicated lane for prestige customers, di ba? So parang ganun naman yung dedicated bandwidth, sir. Sa'yo lang, kung anong sinabi sa yung speed or promised na speed, you will experience a speed close to that promised value. And I guess, what else?
Saka mas mahal yun.
Customers, Meron pa isa, sir. So customers have to be aware that in shared plans, shared bandwidth plans, the ISPs typically advertise the maximum bandwidth, but note that you don't always enjoy the advertised maximum bandwidth. And if you need guaranteed access to a certain bandwidth, then you should subscribe to a dedicated bandwidth plan instead. So again, back to the first item, you have to understand your own requirements. And of course, for the costs, no, when deciding to avail a satellite internet service or even terrestrial services, you should also ask the provider on the costs it will take for them to be connected. For example, ano ba yung mga babayarang equipment? May mga one-time fees po yan. Ano ba yung included dun sa one-time fee? Like, is the transportation of the equipment included already? And the installation fee included already? Magkano yung subscription fee? And then, there are also providers that has data caps na tinatawag natin. Data cap is the amount of parang gigabytes that you can use for a certain period of time. So you have to understand those. And of course, the cost of the plan would also depend on your plan or the duration of your plan or your contract. So kung siguro mas mahaba yung contract duration, it might be cheaper than a contract that would be shorter. So understand those things. And lastly, yung accessibility ng customer to technical support or customer service. So in case you are experiencing troubles, you have to also find out kung available ba sila. Can they be reachable? So, ayun po. So, ulitin ko lang for our consumers, understand your own requirements or user requirements, not only for you, but also for the people who will be using the internet in your household. Understand the type of plan that you need. Is it a shared bandwidth plan or is it a dedicated bandwidth plan? And then understand the costs associated for the installation and your recurring fees. And lastly, yung support services ng internet service provider, their customer service or technical support services po.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maria Victoria Gazmin Basto, Officer in Charge and Chief of the Philippine Space Agency's Space Business Development Division, and Dr. Adrian Salces, Supervising Science Research Specialist of the Philippine Space Agency's Spacecraft Payload and Communication Systems Development Division. One of the things highlighted in these last couple of years or so under the pandemic is the need for connectivity. I think people are now beginning to more seriously reconsider the idea of crowding our big cities and are now more appreciative of living life outside them. In fact, I'm beginning to see people relocating themselves across our archipelago. A key factor that these people and their businesses are concerned about is connectivity. Satellite connectivity is now an available option. There are upsides, mainly dealing with its availability anywhere. Of course, there are downsides as well, primarily involving latency and costs. But those are technology issues that are bound to be addressed as demand ramps up worldwide. Apart from this, as I said earlier, what really made me happy is the realization that there are rural banks serving the needs of communities in our geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas. For progress to be further spread, we need to extend more services, financial and otherwise, to our fellow Filipinos in these harder to reach places. This has been Bing. Catch you again soon on another episode of Regional Roundup.